Welcome to a new episode of the Cartridge Club, where we discuss our game of the month with members of the Cartridge Club community. It's become a tradition here in the Cartridge Club that for the month of April we play a Zelda game. We ain't about to break that tradition yet, so for April the Cartridge Club played The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess. Joining me on the show we have Adam, StumptownRetro, and Captain Algebra. If you have played along, you can always share your own experiences in the forums at cartridgeclub.org or in the community's Discord or across social media by using the hashtag Cartridge Club. Before I start the show, on behalf of the entire Cartridge Club community, I'd like to give a huge shout out to our Patreon Club backers like Joel Boyce, Buried on Mars, Christopher Rohr, Dean Lasagna, and Caleb J. Ross. To our backers and Patreon supporters, thank you. If you're interested in becoming a Patreon supporter for the Cartridge Club, please look at how you can do so at patreon.com/Cartridge Club. Cap, why don't you start us off with your overall thoughts on Twilight Princess?
Sure. Yeah, I absolutely love the game. It is my favorite Zelda game of all time. I think because it's so similar to Ocarina of Time, which used to be my favorite Zelda game of all time. And then I played Twilight, and I just felt like it was a bigger, better, darker version of Ocarina of Time. So I've always loved it. Now, I didn't grow up playing the Zelda games. I think when I was in like kindergarten or first grade, I went to a buddy's house and we played the original Zelda for like 5 minutes and we didn't like it. So we put in Mario. And then I really didn't see another Mario or Zelda game until Ocarina of Time when my neighbor had it. I would play like the beginning, maybe the Great Deku Tree and stuff, but I really didn't get into the series until I got to college and I started playing some more. And I finally, I think I started with Ocarina, then I played the original, and then I went to the Twilight Princess, and it just blew me away. I think it's got a ton of variety with it. You can change from Wolf Link to regular Link. It's got great dungeon design. The bosses are fantastic. I love all the hidden skills you can find. It adds a lot of aspects to the gameplay. And I'm not big on graphics. When I talk about video games, the graphics are the least important part to me. But I have to say I love this type of graphics, the darker, grittier, than say something like Wind Waker, like cartoony. So that's why I love it.
So for me, this game is kind of a mixed bag. There are things about it that I really do love. Like I love the art style and the general direction. I love the control. I feel like it's a true sequel to Ocarina and Majora's Mask, which chronologically, according to Hyrule Historia, it is. But it has a few issues that just like haven't aged well. Like control, like movement always feels very stiff. Like the way you kind of like bounce while you walk. I've never really enjoyed that too much about this game. And coming back to it on the Wii U for the first time, it's still there, and I still don't like it. It doesn't feel as flowy as Wind Waker did, which you think they would have taken that kind of like movement and brought it into the next game that they were making, but they didn't. And I wasn't a huge fan of like that beginning. That beginning is harsh. That beginning is so harsh. Some of the character models look so muddy. They're just really hard to get into those characters at all. Your side characters like Ilya and the kids, I could have cared less about them because they didn't build up enough for me to actually care about them in the first place. And so
I don't mean to cut you off. But by character design, do you mean those children? The children in the game?
Yeah.
They're ugly. The children are pretty damn ugly in this game.
Yes, they are.
Yeah. I mean, like the design element there just wasn't great, especially when you compare it to like the Zoras and the Gorons or anybody in Hyrule Town. Like everybody else seems just so muddy and placid and downplayed. I wasn't a huge fan of Wolf Link either. It felt like just barely a step above Sonic Unleashed Beast Mode Werehog thing. but that was the thing of the time. At the time, they were doing a lot of games like that. You had the Twilight books, werewolves were cool again, So it was a stylistic choice, but it's not one that I enjoyed, because whenever I got to one of those segments in the game, I was like, how quickly can I be done being Wolf Link? Because I can't use any of my skills. Any of the things that the game had you build up for yourself are gone. And then you have to deal with that for the next 30 to 40 minutes while you clear out some shadows and whatnot, or Twilight persons. But aside that, like, I do really like the story. I think that's great. I really like essentially the direction that the game went. Like, I love how it links up to the rest of that, essentially everything about Zelda and the timeline and everything like that. But it just didn't hit for me the way that I was hoping it would. It's definitely like in my bottom 3 to 5 Zelda games, which still are great games overall.
Fair enough.
So the Twilight Princess is my favorite Zelda, 3D Zelda. As far as the question is top-down or 3D Zeldas, I have a favorite for both categories. A Link to the Past is my favorite for 2D, and Twilight Princess is my favorite for 3D. There's so many similarities between the light dark world or Twilight world that's probably why I love Twilight Princess as much as I do, is because A Link to the Past was always my favorite Zelda game growing up. I've played every single Zelda game. I remember playing Zelda before Zelda 2 even existed. I remember being excited for Zelda 2, and then I got excited when A Link to the Past came out because it went back to the original formula, because that was kind of sort of the third game, which I think at the time they were trying to just revamp it, and it was kind of like a remake of the first game, but then they kind of just changed the whole timeline over the years and just kind of kept each game separate. Kind of like how Super Castlevania 4 is actually a remake of the first one, but it's still different enough.
I think too, Zelda 3 originally was like the title before they came up with A Link to the Past for the title. I think it was originally like placeholder was Zelda 3 for A Link to the Past.
I believe so too. As far as like the game, I did dread the moments that you play as Wolf Link. I don't completely despise being Wolf Link. I liked when you get to the point where you can flip-flop back and forth quickly, like between the two, and because I thought it was a cool thing that you have to like go into the vision and you can dig, and then sometimes you can dig underground and go under stuff. I thought that was cool. The combat was really wonky and weird. I wasn't a big fan of that. I did, after replaying the game after all these years, and maybe it's just because I became a better gamer, I felt that Twilight Princess was extremely easy. Like, if you go back to my my stream of it and you see when I fought Ganon, he was a joke. Like, I just mopped the floor with him. Like, I literally just ran circles around him like this. Waited for him to do his little kick and then hit him. Ran a circle around, waiting for him to do his little kick and then hit him. And just kept doing it until I beat him. But overall, the story, I think, is probably what holds it the most for me, and why I still hold it up high, is because this is the first time we've got a full, huge, very story-driven Zelda game. Ocarina of Time was story-driven, but this took it to the next level, at least for me. And same goes into when you go into Twilight, or like in Wind Waker, same thing. Like, you got these story-driven things, and that's kind of reeled back a little bit. That was a little bit missing for me in Breath of the Wild, but we won't talk. We're talking about Twilight Princess right now. But yeah, it's my favorite Zelda.
Does anyone remember when the GameCube was revealed and they had that Zelda teaser where it was like mature, like Link and Ganon fighting, and then we got Wind Waker?
Such a disappointment.
Yeah, that was like, I mean, I have it here. It's a little check mark question for everybody. Like, do you prefer? And I already know Cap's answer. But like, do you prefer Wind Waker versus Twilight Princess? And the reason I asked that is because I remember, I think that led to my hate for Wind Waker. Was because I wanted that. Whatever they teased, I was like, give me that 100%. Give me that game. And then in 2004 at E3, they revealed Twilight Princess for the GameCube. And like, if you look at the video now, like, that still gives me a little bit of the chills. I don't know if you guys have ever seen that yet, but if you haven't, I do recommend going to YouTube and watching it. The reveal where they do we got one more thing just for you, and it was like, that's the game. That is the reason why I bought a GameCube on launch. But anyways, yeah, Wind Waker or Twilight Princess. Adam, since you were speaking this?
Yeah, I love Wind Waker. The thing is, everyone always had this, like, everyone hated on Wind Waker because of the different art direction, because it went to a cartoonish thing. And for me, I didn't care. To me, it was more Zelda. I'm like, yes, please, just give me more Zelda. I'm okay with that. I didn't care. Like I love both games. But again, like as I was saying, Twilight Princess is my favorite 3D Zelda.
Yeah.
But Wind Waker is in my top 5.
I'm actually more of a Wind Waker fan, and I even was at the time because I grew up more so with the Game Boy games. So I played a lot of Link's Awakening DX, and the Seasons and Oracle Ages, Oracle Seasons. And so for me, Wind Waker felt more in tune with that style in terms of like more cartoony, more cutesy sort of like aesthetic to it. And for me, it was just a natural progression. When I played N64 as a kid, I had to go to a friend's house. Like I had Sega stuff. My household was Sega all the way. So like I would have my own cartridge that I bought at the store, bring it to their house to play it. That was my experience with all the N64 games. That's how I played Ocarina. That's how I played Majora. That's how I played Link to the Past. I had an NES as a kid, so I played the original 2 on NES. But for me, Wind Waker was just a continuation of the thing that I had grown way more attached to. And I loved it. I felt the score was great. The movement was fantastic. Like I didn't really care too much about it being that realistic thing. I knew that was just like a tech demo that I saw in a magazine as a kid because I didn't see the video. I was living in Germany at the time, so there wasn't like huge video game news over there. They were just like, here's your German publication. Here's what came out in E3. Cool. And then toss aside. But for me, definitely Wind Waker was my favorite of the two. It still is. Like I would rather play Wind Waker HD over this any day. Also, Wind Waker HD just seems like it had a lot more going on with the remake rather than just scaling it up to HD, which this one you could definitely tell from textures is exactly what they did. They're just like export as 1080p. We're good. All right, let's move on.
Cap, do we even need to ask you, or
It's only fair. I'm allowed to share my thoughts.
yes.
Easily, Twilight Princess is better. I absolutely hate Wind Waker, and it wasn't necessarily that we got that teaser and it turned out not to be that. I just remember seeing the original, trailers and stuff for Wind Waker, and the graphical styles always bothered me. And I don't really care about graphics too much, but for some reason, I hate how that one looks. And so I didn't really have a GameCube. I actually played Twilight Princess first on the Wii, and I didn't get it for the GameCube until a couple of years ago. And so I didn't really play the GameCube much, which is probably why I didn't give it a chance. But a few years ago, I finally was like, okay, I'm playing a lot of Zelda games. I want to play Wind Waker. And I started playing it. And I had to put it down. I couldn't stand it. It was boring. I hate the sailing. It just takes forever. I know they fixed that in the HD with the Swift sail, but in the GameCube version, it's just so tedious to take out your Wind Waker, change the wind direction so you can go somewhere else, and I hate it. And I'll probably play through the HD version at some point just to give it a shot. But yeah, it's probably my least favorite Zelda of all time. I jokingly say I'd rather play the CDI games, but I've never played them, so I can't really say that. But I think I'd like to try them more than I'd rather play Wind Waker a second time. I can't stand it.
Speaking of tedious, I was going to ask you, so what do you think of Skyward Sword then? Because I always felt it was a little tedious to go in, to spin the wheel through, because and choose your items instead of having like a quick tap like you do in Twilight Princess.
Mm-hmm.
Like I always felt that Skyward Sword was a bit tedious with that too. But
right.
What do you think of Sky? Because if I remember correctly, Skyward Sword was supposed to be a sequel to Twilight Princess, but because that game was so dark, and at the time Twilight Princess wasn't received very well at first, did I think they scrapped that idea, but still sort of had the engine? Because you play Twilight Princess and then you play Skyward Sword, you see so many things that carried between the two games that you can tell it was supposedly a sequel to it.
Yeah, for sure. Skyward Sword's my third favorite Zelda game of all time. I love it. I just love the origin story of Zelda. But as for the wheel thing, I don't never really bothered me because motion control doesn't bother me. So for me, like you hold the button and you point to that and you pick it. Like that doesn't take very long. In fact, like I feel like if you're cycling through stuff, that will take longer than just simply open the wheel, point, and you got it.
Yeah, I tried to do it with the controller, and that's why it was a little annoying. But I did play it originally with the motion controls. I was going to when I replayed it on the Switch, I didn't like the motion controls at all. I thought they were terrible. It was a bad port. The Wii motion control was way more accurate. So I enjoyed the motion on the Wii version over
Mm-hmm.
the Switch version.
Yeah, and I've only played the Wii version. I have the Switch version only because I love Skyward Sword, but when I play it, I always play the original.
Yeah, no, I've played both, and I think the only reason that the Switch one feels a little worse is because of the Joy-Con. It's not necessarily because of the motion control, because I feel the motion control in the Switch is actually quite good. It's just we're not used to holding it, and it doesn't feel substantial to hold, just like the Wii remote with the Remote Plus. It felt substantial, like you're holding the hilt of a sword. So when you're moving around, it felt better than it does on the Switch. Like maybe if they came out with some little accessory for the Switch to make it not be so janky, that would be fantastic. But yeah, no, I didn't have a problem with Skyward Sword either. I'm a Cap on that one. Third favorite for sure.
It's in my top 5 too, because especially because of the story. I think I don't even know if the making an accessory would make that any better. I think what it was is the fact that I had to constantly recalibrate it over and over again. To whereas the Wii U or the Wii version, you had the motion like sensor bar. You never really had to mess with that. But when you're in the middle of a fight and then you have to recalibrate the Joy-Con, it was annoying. So that's why I switched to the controller. And then I eventually beat it with the controller. But
if you guys thought I was harsh on Zelda 2, wait for the episode when we cover Skyward Sword, and you'll get my real opinion about that game. As I find that to be like bottom 2 Zelda games of all time.
But as far as story,
I can understand why.
I hate the story too. I hate the story too. So
that's all right. I feel the same with Majora's Mask. Majora's Mask is down there with Zelda 2 for me.
So I guess real quick, my little brief history with this game is, yeah, I remember when this game was revealed too. Like I was super excited. I went to Southridge Mall, and I don't remember if it was even GameStop at the time. I think it might have been like, could have been a Babbage's. It could have been whatever it was, the GameStop that was upstairs, Adam. It was not quite the GameStop yet. It was something else. But I remember going there, pre-ordering it right away because I was like, that's the Zelda game I want. And then I remember it got delayed again. Like it got delayed multiple times, and then
5 years, I think. Like 5 years, I think it got delayed.
It got delayed because I remember it was supposed to come out one more year, like a year ahead of the Wii, and they're like, well, we want to launch this game with the Wii. So I remember having to wait again for it, and then eventually it came out, right? But the thing is, it came out then around Christmas, around the Christmas that I got God of War for the PS2, and there was another like maybe Metal Gear Solid 3, maybe something. I think I want to say. So, and I remember like Christmas Day, like playing, like trying to play those 3 games, and I was like, all right, finally gonna Zelda games. I know when I play those games, I go hard. I play them, and I play for more hours, and I want to say I got stuck as Wolf Link in the sewers with Minda, right? And then I just remember like, geez, this just is just like a slog right here, this opening right here. And then I just ended up playing like, like saving my progress, and then playing something else, going to God of War and having a really good time, and then playing probably Metal Gear Solid 3 and having a really good time. And something else came out, and I always meant to come back to Twilight Princess, and I never did until many years later when I met Adam. And Adam told me to play Twilight Princess. And I remember, I think, Adam, you warned me it's a long game, and I was like, yeah, okay. But I absolutely loved it. And I think the main reason why I absolutely loved the game was because Ocarina of Time is my favorite game of all time. And it still is. And is like the true sequel to Ocarina of Time. And there's like references to Majora's Mask as well in the game. But like when you start seeing all like the little like homages to Ocarina, and then you're right, Adam. I believe there is some criticism about Twilight Princess in that it's too close to Ocarina of Time. But to me, like, I don't care. I was like, that's what I want. I was like, give me that sequel. Take what worked, make it better. Like, or add more stuff to it, because that is what I want. But if it wasn't for probably that 3-hour slog, because anytime you play this game, I try to warn anyone who's going to play Twilight Princess, if you can make it through just that first 3 hours, it's a really good game. It is a really good game. At least I think so. I think the majority of people who like the 3D Zeldas will probably feel that way. I do feel like it's better than Wind Waker, but I do like Wind Waker. Wind Waker was one of those ones where, like I said, I bought it still at launch because it was a Zelda game. I remember when the pre-order bonus was too. If you pre-order bonused it, either at Babbage's or GameStop or whatever, you got the disc that had Ocarina of Time and then the Master Quest on it. So I was like, I need that. Give me that. So put down the money. They gave me the disc right away. And then I remember I picked it up and I hated the sailing part for the most part. And then because it was like it. I know this is a Twilight Princess show, but for Wind Waker, it was very much I'm scared to explore because all I'm seeing is blue water, right? I don't know where to go. I have to keep pulling out of a map. With Ocarina, I never felt that way when I hit the main field, right? And then Twilight Princess, the same kind of way. After I got out of where the homeland was, home base was, I'm like, okay, here's the world. Let's go exploring. But for Twilight Princess, yeah, it was. I said it took me many years, probably 10 years later after it came out before I actually sat down and played it. But I loved what I played. And I beat it on the GameCube originally because I wanted nothing to do with motion controls. I was like, I wanted to straight play it with a controller. They came out both at the same time. So I was like, just give me the controller option. I'm playing on that. I'm not playing a Wii. But yeah, I loved what I played on the GameCube. Loving playing it again on the Wii U. I think it's pretty good looking. I do agree that Wind Waker HD got a better port. That they did probably put more time and effort into cleaning that one up than Twilight Princess, but I still think Twilight Princess looks and runs and plays great on the Wii U. You know, here is a follow-up question because Ocarina of Time has Navi, right, as his Link's companion. Skyward Sword's got Fi, right? Is it?
Yep.
Twilight Princess has got Minda. Do any of the other ones have it? Like, I don't remember Breath of the Time having a companion, and I don't remember.
Jorah's Mask has one.
Oh yeah, it's like Navi's like
dark counterpart.
Yeah. Or like, well, it's not Navi, it's another like fairy thing, right? Because
Exactly.
Link's looking for Navi because Navi disappears at the end of Ocarina of Time, which sends him on this path. But is Minda like the best companion out of all the companions for the 3D games?
I think so.
We all agree, I guess, right?
I think she's one of the best characters in the game. And I actually think there was more behind her as a character and her development than there was Zelda herself.
Yeah,
I agree.
No, absolutely. And that was the point of the game, was to make her a character. And I think they heard some of the feedback from Ocarina and Majora that they didn't want to do that again. So they definitely made Minna into a character that we could actually care about. Didn't get annoying, only popped up when there was something you had to do with them, which was fantastic. They weren't just, bugging you all the time about everything, which is great, which is something that they forgot about when they made Skyward Sword. But,
the batteries are low.
Great.
Yeah, with Midna, like,
bring it to a sword.
Yeah, with Midna, if she needed something, that little, her face like showed up on screen, and there was like a little like tone that made a sound, and that was it. Not like Navi, which is like, hey, or Fi coming out the sword and interrupting you or shouting at you. It's like, it just was super annoying. I don't know why they did so well with Midna and then backtracked with Fi.
Well, she is the titled princess of the game, right? She is the Twilight Princess. Which was the nice little twist at the end, because they originally reveal like Zelda as being the Twilight Princess because her world's under Twilight. You eventually find out that no, actually, Minda is the Twilight Princess, and when you get more background about the world. Before we move on to the story, real quick, what version did everyone play for this playthrough?
Wii U.
GameCube.
Anyone ever play the Wii version? Cab, you said you played the Wii version, right? Adam, did you play too? Or
I played it for a few hours and I was like, I am never touching this again. I'm going back to the GameCube version. And then years later, when the HD one came out, that's the one I replayed. But yeah, the motion controls were terribly done. Skyward Sword is where they did nail the motion. It's just it felt so forced in Twilight Princess. It felt
probably because of the Motion Plus, right? The Wii Motion Plus came along for that point.
It's because it wasn't accurate. Like if you were to swipe your hand this way or this way or this way in Skyward Sword, it went in those directions. To whereas if you wanted you did in Twilight Princess, it was just straightforward, and it was just there was no motion going with it. So I think they perfected it with Skyward Sword, to where it was just kind of gimmicky on the or for the Wii version and Twilight Princess.
Stump, what about you? Have you ever played the Wii version?
Yeah, that was actually my first experience with the game was the Wii version because that's what I had at the time, and I didn't really have problems with the motion controls at the time. Not until Skyward Sword came out and I saw what they could actually do with motion control. But they didn't have Wii Motion Plus back then. They didn't have that 8-way gyroscope that they had in the Wii Motion Plus, so they were kind of limited by the time. The thing that I really do love about motion control and something they kept on the Wii U, if you're playing on the gamepad only, was gyroscopic aiming. So the gyroscopic aiming for your bow and for your slingshot, when you still use that was fantastic, and it still is. I mean, if you ever play Splatoon or, for instance, like use gyroscopic controls, it's a lot faster than using a stick. It's just sort of the same thing here, and it kind of alleviates some of the jankiness of some of the gameplay for me, where it feels kind of stiff to be able to use that gyroscopic control until 3 hours later when your battery dies on your gamepad and you have to switch back to the Pro controller.
So I know Navi is kind of in the game on the Wii version, right? But is it just like as a pointer, like a fairy is the fairy? Because I've seen people play the Wii version, and because I remember I've had to use a couple of YouTube video guides to help me like with heart pieces, and they're playing the Wii version, so it's reversed. So I'm always like remember because it's mirrored, right? So it's so it's always
right-handed. Yeah,
that's the first time Link's ever been right-handed, and the main reason why is because the majority of people are right-handed.
Right.
So. Sorry, lefties. So me playing the GameCube version at the time, I was always like, what? Oh, that's right. I have to go left here as opposed to going right or something. But I know I always saw like Navi on the screen. Even I was watching Oaz play stream because he's playing the Wii version for this month. I always see Navi, but I think she's just a pointer, right? It's not really.
Yeah, it's just a pointer like the star on Mario Galaxy.
Mm-hmm. It's one thing I thought was kind of neat, and maybe I don't know. I can't remember if it's in the GameCube version, but Mr. Q Dog, Eric, the mighty Q Dog, pointed out that like Minda's shadow is still above Link. It appears even in like the Light World when he's the wolf. So I think that's a nice little feature that I said. At least I know it's in the GameCube version. I can't point to it because it's something that's always went past my head. But count out to Q Dog for picking up all the little details that went past me. So, but I digress. For the story here,
I mean, up until the end, it's pretty much straightforward Zelda story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it pretty much is, and it's I'll say this: I'm not going to digress so much in the story. You guys can bring up points. The points that I think really still made me like love this game still to this day are it's like its tie-ins back to Ocarina of Time, right? I love that the spirit that's like teaching you along the way essentially is like it's hinted that that's the Link from Ocarina of Time, that he's training you because you have his bloodline. I love to like it kind of points out because in Ocarina of Time like every girl and woman's like throwing themselves at like Link in that game, right? But you find out kind of if you follow the hints in this game that he went with the girl from Lon Lon Ranch, because he is a like rancher in this game. You find out like God, it's gonna bother me. I want to say
Malin.
Yeah,
Malin.
It's Malin. So he goes with Malin because it continues on like he's a rancher. So as opposed to being like royalty, right? If he went with Zelda, he'd be like royalty, or he would be a part fish. He would be Zora if he just went with the Zora princess. So like it's all these like little like references. Like there's the Skull Kid in this game carrying that part on, it's all that stuff, and even like the flashback of what happened to Ganon, right? Because Ganon was stuck. He was sent to the Twilight Realm at the end of Ocarina of Time when he dies. If you go to the pathway where Link returns like the Master Sword and he warns like Zelda about everything that's going to happen, Ganon gets sent to the Twilight Realm and he's being held there by the sages from Ocarina of Time, despite them not carrying. I wish that would have been kind of the thing, that they kept the sages from Ocarina of Time, but maybe they just didn't want to show them all getting killed when Ganon breaks free, so they just put these like ghostly people as the sages. But that's to me the part of the story that like keeps me attached. Now finding out about Minda, her role in the game, and Zant, that's all great stuff for me. Is there any like parts in the story that like hit for you? Because like to me, like that is like the draw in for me for this game.
Yeah, for me, it was just the difference between the two worlds. So, like Adam mentioned earlier, like the light and the dark worlds, like in Link of the Past, you got the Twilight realm and you got the regular realm. I really liked that difference between the two, and I was just very interested in what is Midna? I knew there's more to her than just she's from the Twilight realm, right? There had to be a reason why she was important, and so just seeing that evolve as the story goes on and finding out more about her, that to me made it a really good story.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat where it's how everything evolves from Ocarina of Time and how things kind of progress through there, and you see those like links in between the two. I didn't get the whole he went with Malin thing. I just feel like Link is just reincarnated and wherever he's necessary to be in any particular generation, which is why he's resurrected where he is in Wind Waker and where he is in this game, and so on and so forth. So for me, I didn't see that link, but now I do, and that's interesting to think about.
But that I was gonna say I'm going to touch up on exactly what you're talking about, because that's where when you play Skyward Sword, you learn that there's the three spirits. Like in Link is the spirit of the hero, and he is born wherever he's needed.
Yeah, definitely. But it seemed like they were trying to play more closely together in this game than they were in Skyward Sword, where they're kind of doing a little bit of revisionism. But no, I really like the story after I got out of the intro town, like because again, I didn't care about the kids getting kidnapped or anything like that. I'm like, all right, when's the Zelda story going to start? And then you wake up in the sewers, and that's when it starts getting you into that Zelda story. And I really did appreciate how they set up Zelda as the Twilight Princess, but then she's not. I liked all the story behind every single dungeon and why they're being protected, why they're being shut off, and the kind of quests you have to go on to be able to open them up. Those were all really, really great moments for me. I did really love the spirit of the hero that you have to learn from. I thought that was a fantastic addition, and it's part of the reason I didn't like Wolf Link as much, because I'm like, oh, I learned this cool new thing that I'm not going to be able to use for 25 to 30 minutes. So it was one of those things that it's just really, really well built up on story, and it pays off really well. And that's the part that's going to be the most impactful for me after playing it again, that I'll remember about this game, is that story.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the story is what has driven that game. And Ryan and I have discussions on this all the time. For me, one of the most important things to a video game, aside from just the controls of the character and the movement, is story. I have to actually care and be invested into a game for me to actually enjoy it. Like, you can give me the best gameplay in the world, I'll even like Destiny, but that story is so buried into everything. Unless you're constantly playing that game all the time, you have no idea. I don't care about the world, but when I actually care about that world and that story is built, I am invested. And that's 60 hours. I wanted more of Twilight Princess. I'm like, oh, I beat the game. It's over. Where's more of it? I do want that sequel one day, even though Skyward Sword was intentionally, quote unquote, supposed to be the sequel. I still would want them to go back to do another sequel to Twilight Princess, an actual one. What happens beyond Midna? Do we ever see Midna again outside of Hyrule Warriors, I guess, at this point? But you think about all the Zelda characters, Midna is probably one of the most fleshed out secondary character outside of Link in Zelda, out of anyone else. And you see her progress as a character.
She's way more fleshed out than Zelda is in this game.
Yeah.
Right.
She's more fleshed out than Zelda is in most games except Wind Waker.
Yeah.
That's true. Or well, maybe Breath of the Wild too. She's kind of, with the cutscenes, probably gives Zelda a little bit more.
Yeah, Zelda's pretty fleshed out. And I know some people don't count this as canon, but it is the same writers that wrote Breath of the Wild. I consider Age of Calamity canon. Whether or not that storyline takes place before or quote unquote after Breath of the Wild 2, we don't know. But I think the story, that if you take both games and put it together, I think Zelda's well fleshed out. And I think that whole thing is really, really good. But that can be a future talk about Breath of the Wild streams if that becomes one of the games. But I just think like out of all the characters up until Breath of the Wild, I think Midna is one of the most fleshed out characters in full out of almost any other Zelda game.
Yeah, I love Midna. I would love to see her again, but I think they tried to shut the door on a sequel or having her appear again when she shatters the Mirror of Twilight at the end of the game.
Yeah.
So they'd have to find some way to get her back, but I would love to see Midna in another game.
Me too.
Yeah, I was actually hoping she was going to be in a Link Between Worlds, but then that didn't happen.
Sorry, I had to find my unmute button there. All right. So we'll just pivot to. Do we need to cover characters? Like, I mean, aside from maybe the villains, like I think we can cover that when we get to the villains discussion or something like that. Because I think maybe Zant and everything like that. I don't know if we have anything. Like, does anyone really want to talk about the kids or like the Zoras at this point? Like, do you have much to say? Because like I think going to the dungeon discussion will much be a better talking point here.
The characters are kind of a weak aspect of the game.
Yeah.
I think the prince, the Zora prince, could have been. I would have liked to see more of him, and I would like to see what will become of him, because I thought he was a potential really cool character, and then you went and you saved his life and everything, but then that was really it. That's really all you got of that.
Like, I don't know if anyone wants to talk about the bug girl.
Agatha?
No. I mean, I don't know. Like, the only character that really stood out, like, besides your, Midna and Link and Zelda and Zant and, your villains, was Bo. And that's just because he was ridiculous and cheated to get past Gorons. And, that's great. The sumo wrestling was kind of janky, but whatever.
Oh, don't forget about the tavern girl.
Telma.
Telma she stands out too. She's always flirting with Link and
Well, the postman looks kind of familiar to like the guy. Is there? No, there's not postman. I'm sorry, I was thinking of the racer from Ocarina of Time. But the only one I can really that still like kind of reminds me or stands out to me that's at least a non-villain is that. Was it Leah? Right? Ilya, sorry. Because she's really close friends with Link, and then she has her amnesia. Where then when you run into her, she's like, you think they're probably close friends, but like you think so. Well, she steals Epona right from the beginning. Remember? And she's like, I can't believe you're not taking good care of Epona. And but then she gets her amnesia, takes care of the prince and everything like that. For I don't know, maybe they could have made a little bit more of her. It seems like she was kind of a very important deal, but
I think to Link she was important. I think they were just kind of trying to show, okay, this is Link's childhood friend. I know in some of the past Zelda games like Minish Cap, Zelda was Link's childhood friend. I think it was just kind of like basically saying, you know what, this is that person that maybe Link will end up with, like how you say Malin, he ended up with Malin in Ocarina. Maybe this Link ends up with Ilya because Midna knows that she can't stay. So obviously he's probably going to have to settle down with his best friend who said, I will always be here waiting for you.
Yeah, no, she was just kind of there. She had that really cool cutscene, though. I'll give her that.
With the white eyes.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Right, I think it got real dark for a second. Let's get on to the favorite dungeons or temples or however you would prefer to call it in the Zelda game. Did you guys have a favorite temple in this game? Because that's the one thing that to me. So here's my little gripe about Breath of the Wild. There's no dungeons, right? And like I hope with whatever the sequel is for Breath of the Wild 2 that they bring back dungeons, because like to me like the dungeons are some of the best parts of any Zelda game. There's parts like that always has a good boss fight in it. There's always like a couple in every Zelda game. There's like one or two where there's an awesome boss fight and you're like, that was an awesome temple, or the puzzles are a lot of fun. Did you guys have a favorite dungeon in this game? Or a least favorite one? We're like, oh, I don't ever want to go back to doing that one because everyone rags on the water temple from Ocarina of Time.
I love that temple. I don't care what anyone says. I love that temple.
I like the water temple too.
It is an awesome temple.
Those are babies. You suck if you can't beat the water temple. Did you guys have any favorites or least favorites?
Yeah, my favorite was the Goron Mines. So the Death Mountain Temple. I felt that it was well designed. I felt that you learned skills as you needed them. You had the enemies where you had to shoot out the eyes to get past them, which was integral to the boss fight, pulling on chains and everything like that. Like everything in that temple built up to your boss fight, which I felt was really good. And I love the magnetic boots and being able to go on the ceiling. Gave me a small gripe with the controls with the auto targeting, not being able to target the Dongo's tails automatically, or just being able to just flick the right stick and switch to their tail. Kind of annoying. But aside that, really, really great dungeon overall. And I felt that it was one that stood out to me the most in the game.
I say Goron Mines is really cool. I agree about the magnetic boots. Really cool item. I just wish you could move a little bit faster when you're walking around on the ceiling and stuff. But I love the look of the fire and everything. It's a really good one. But my favorite is Arbiter's Ground. It's always really stuck with me. I love the design of it. I love the look of it. And the boss, Stalord, the mini boss was a Death Sword. And then the spinner, the item you get, are some of my favorite things in the game. I wish the spinner was utilized more. I felt like it was a really cool item. It works really well in the fight with Stalord. And then with Death Sword, how it's just like a sword in the middle of a room, and there's all these ropes hanging off of it, and it's really creepy. And all of a sudden, you start fighting the sword, and then there's a phantom of it. It's really cool. I've always loved Arbiter's Ground.
I love every aspect of it. Like I love every dungeon. I love everything about it. All the boss fights were great. I can't really sit there and pick one.
Well, all right, nitpick one. since you loved everything about it, give me one. Say like, okay, you know what, this could have been better. This could have been better right here.
The final, like where you're in Hyrule Castle and you're trying to get down and I felt it was just too short. There wasn't enough in there to unlock, or there were really no full-on puzzles to try to get around in the castle itself. Maybe if you went down further underneath the castle, more dungeon-ish type areas before you can get to them, maybe that I could gripe on, but
I'll copycat with here and go with Arbiter Grounds. I love the spinner. The spinner is like, I love the boss fight because even like, let's say you miss, then it's like the speed, like you're building yourself back up. It's like I don't know, like that whole part is like, I don't know. It's like I don't know how to describe it. It's just like I don't want to say adrenaline, but it's very much like, all right, you gotta catch up, and you just start building them back up as you start spinning against the wheel. I love it. In the spinner, I agree with you. I wish it could have been used a lot more. Because, well, let's go on to the next part. Like, if you have a favorite like item, did you have a favorite item? Because like I said, I would say the spinner, but because it probably isn't used enough, I would say maybe the double claw shot. Right? I know there's that one boss fight in the sky, right, where was it like a dragon? I can't remember what exactly it is, but like you use the claws to go back until you get to the top of it, and then you just whack the crap out of it with your sword. But the double claw shot, I think, is probably my favorite because it's like, it's one of those things where it's like, okay, you built on the hook shot, and then you made it better, give me a double, right? So that would be my favorite item in the game that you get from unlocking it in the temple. Did you guys have anything like that that's a favorite for you?
I would have to agree. Yeah, the claw shot was a definite upgrade over the old grip hook from the original ones. I felt that it added a whole lot of variety, and it was usable outside of the dungeon, which the spinner just doesn't really feel so usable outside of the dungeon. Even something like that I thought I would love again, like the wind boomerang, just didn't do enough outside of the dungeon except for stop a fire on a carriage once. And I'm like, all right, well, that's great. Like, there weren't a whole lot of things besides that did anything outside of their dungeons, but that was the claw shot was the one that really stood out.
Yeah, for sure. The double claw shot used with so much different things. It opened so much in the world to find different heart pieces and stuff once you got it. Plus, you could get your giant quiver in the tent in Castletown with the star mini game. You had to have the double claw shot to do that. I still go with the spinner just because I think it's really unique and fun. There's just one part I don't like. It's a heart piece, I believe, somewhere in Hyrule Field, but you're like in this canyon and you follow these spinner tracks and you have to jump from one to the other. But for some reason, it happens multiple times when I play it. I'm going along the track and I need to jump to the other side, and I start going backwards instead of going forwards. And it's like a really touchy timing thing of when you have to jump over to the other track to actually keep going forward. That's my only complaint with the spinner, but I love it. I actually really like the Dominion Rod too. I think it's cool how you can take control of things, especially when you take control of the big giant statues. You can use their hammers to attack things. I think all the items are good. It's just like Stump mentioned, they just aren't used enough outside of their dungeons.
Oh, I like the fact that you can combine your bombs to your arrows.
Yes.
That was really cool too.
Mm-hmm.
I do like the boomerang though, for the fact that you can target multiple things though. I mean, that's a nice little upgrade, I would say, like over the standard boomerang from the previous games. I think that's actually kind of neat that you can even cross it, so you can go like, because there is like one puzzle, at least I remember, where it's like, I can't remember if you had to put out the flames or something like that in a certain pattern on the top of these little pillars, where it's like you had to go like back and forth, so you couldn't just go like a circle pattern. You just had to target it this way. And
It was the treasure chest, I believe.
Yeah. It was a Z.
You
You had to make a Z. You had to make a Z.
And I thought that was pretty neat. So I guess like maybe if it could have been used more, that'd have been great. But like I thought that was like you took something and you made it better.
I wish it did more damage, like some of the other boomerangs did though. Like whenever you throw it, like it would just stun the enemy for kind of, in a sense. Which actually, I have a clip that someone made on my Twitch channel that I actually threw the boomerang and then hit like one of the goblin things and convinced him to jump off the cliff. He just walked towards me. He just jumped off. It was hilarious.
Do you remember what kind of enemy that was by chance? You said it was a goblin, right?
It was like it was in the forest temple.
Gotcha. I was just trying to think of a good segue into like enemies, but I don't think that's gonna work. Did you guys like have like any enemies that you enjoyed countering, like even boss fights or like some creature that you would like, or anyone that you despise seeing?
I hated the rats because you couldn't see them unless you had your senses. Those ghost rats and stuff. I hate it because all of a sudden you start moving really slow as like Wolf Link. You're like, why am I moving slow? And then you have to see them and then like spin them off. I didn't like that. I thought most of the enemies were just kind of fine. I did like the Bulbin archers just because then usually they were far away, so I could take out my bow and snipe them from far. That was always fun to do. And the chews were interesting because, there's different color ones and you could pick up their stuff in a bottle. And like the yellow ones gave you lantern oil. Red gave you, I think, 8 heart pieces. Blue fully recovered it. Purple was bad. That could sometimes kill you, so you didn't want to get purple. But it just made the chews more important than just an enemy that falls down on you and breaks into pieces as you kill it.
Yeah, I agree. I think the only enemy that was just I found annoying, not the one I disliked, were the ones that were with the shells, especially before you get the hook shot, and then you had to like get around them and hit them from behind. But like I just didn't like because they were constantly clamped down and you like hit me, like clink clink. Okay, hold on, you gotta wait. 1, 2, 3. Okay, he got back up. Now I can try to hit him. Especially the bigger ones that you see later on, like the big like rhino looking ones. Were just kind of annoying. But like overall, like most of the enemies were fine. A lot of the boss fights were great too.
Yeah, I will say that the boss fights in this game stood out a lot. Each one of them was fun to like figure out the mechanic and everything like that for. I remembered most of the mechanics, which just shows the strength because I hadn't played this game in 10 years and it still stood out. Like I still remembered like, oh yeah, I just need to, throw the bombs in this thing's mouth or hit the monkey and have it drop the bomb or use the boomerang to throw it into that thing's mouth. Everything kind of just meshed well together with it. The certain like I mentioned before, the Dodongos, just because they had 2 places for you to target was kind of annoying, especially because the game was not built to handle that. But aside that, everything was fine. Like I enjoyed the enemies weren't really an issue. There was nothing that was too annoying except for anytime I had to be on Epona while doing anything, because Epona just liked to grab onto the environment a lot. It just felt like you would come near an edge of something and it would just stick to it. And then you'd have to turn, like anything on the bridge where you had to turn around. Epona just didn't want to turn. And I constantly flung off the bridge over and over again. I'm like, oh, this is not like Breath of the Wild. I've been spoiled now. I can't go back to crap.
Epona I think was probably one of the worst parts of the game because Epona just didn't feel right while you were riding Epona at all. It felt like you were literally like, if you've ever played a Lego game, how stiff those vehicles are, it's kind of how it felt. And like I don't know how many times I would run to go jump over a gate and I would just hit the gate and I had to go back all the way down, which took forever to turn around and come back down. Then try to go then and then try to get her to jump up over the gate. And there's a lot of times you just wouldn't jump over the gate. And I had to keep doing that over and over again. But then it made it even worse when you had the chase after the burning carriage. Even when you had to fight Ganon at the end and you had to chase after Ganon, it was kind of annoying. I'm like, let's just get this over with.
Did you like the joust fight at all by chance?
I love that fight. I think it's fun.
On the bridges and everything like that. I mean, like, I agree with the little spin around part where like it stops, you're like, okay, pause, and then it does that like horse spin around basically kind of thing. But I agree, like, you know, it took me a minute to realize that you can actually like cheese them at least in the first fight, right? I think you can just hold down the B charge button and then just kind of run to the side and do like the little swipe cut at him. At least in the first fight, because then he comes back with more armor on the side, so you have to kind of I believe you have to use like the bow and arrow, right? With the bombs.
You have to use the bow and arrow to hit him in the face.
Yeah.
I just use a bow the whole time. That just made it easier.
It took me a minute to figure that one out, but I thought it was kind of neat, the little jousting. And I'll tell you, the cutscenes like leading up to it, basically, where you see like, you know, when the kids like right before I think Link gets to town and like the one kid gets kidnapped, right? You see like them come in slow motion making the turn and everything like that. Like that was like a really well done cutscene. There's a few of them in this game here, but that one always kind of like sticks out to me. I'm like, oh man, that was like really, really well done. Where you gotta go fuck some shit up here.
I don't remember. Was riding Epona in Ocarina of Time the same, or was it better or worse? I felt like
it was a little more fluid. Like I feel like this game, because it was made on the GameCube, it has 8-way directional control, whereas the N64 had more fluid control. And I feel like Epona was designed around that, so it doesn't seem like it's as 3-dimensional or 360 degrees. It feels very stilted on how Epona moves.
And you really just use opponent to speed things up, basically, in Ocarina of Time. Like you really that and like bow hunting, right? Like you really they don't force you in boss fights on Epona in Ocarina of Time. She's only there to like help you get around Hyrule Field faster. So maybe that's maybe that's why it's a better use of Epona, because it's like, hey, this is cool. It's just like a car kind of thing to get me somewhere quicker. I mean, you have to do the jump fences and races, you know, to get like heart pieces. In Ocarina of Time, but like for the most part, like, you're not like fighting people. You're not swinging swords on Epona in Ocarina of Time. This one you kind of have to.
Yeah.
So
I don't see Epona never really bothered me in Twilight Princess. I felt like jumping over fences and stuff was easier in Twilight Princess than in Ocarina of Time. I feel like I miss jumping fences in Ocarina of Time way more than Twilight Princess. So she does get stuck on stuff like Stump mentioned. That's the only thing that I've had issues with, but I felt like controlling her felt pretty fluid to me.
And I'll say this: I still think she plays easier than the horse riding in Breath of the Wild. Controversial take.
Yeah, very controversial.
Because I hate having to tame the horses and then like building trust with them. Didn't care for that. Just give me Epona, please. There's the Ganon horse. I know. I found that one.
It kind of gave me Epona because I had the amiibo or whatever. So I had Epona right off the bat, which is great. So I didn't really have that problem in Breath of the Wild. But like after playing Breath of the Wild and then Ghost of Tsushima, which both have fantastic horse mechanics, and then coming back to this where any object it's not even going to slightly turn, I was like, oh man, this is like playing an Assassin's Creed game. This is bad.
Well, it's not like as far as like, you know, like Red Dead Redemption either, was riding the horse there, which again you have to tame those horses there too.
Yeah, but it's only for just to break them in, and then like you don't have to build up trust anymore after you broke them in, from what I remember.
Yeah, you don't. You just have to.
The other one you have to keep like. It's been a minute. I've never replayed Breath of the Wild since beating it, so I'm going off of memory here. I swear I got the motorcycle because I bought the DLC, and I don't think I've ever used the horse again. Then so.
I just basically fast travel and glide everywhere. I don't ride the horse. And even in Twilight Princess, I only rode Epona when I had to. A lot of it was just me running, and just if you just keep rolling, you roll faster than you run. I mean, unless you're Wolf-Link. Wolf-Link actually runs a decent speed. And then that's all I did. I only rode Epona if I had to, and I just kept running and rolling.
Plus, once you get the ability to warp places, like you do that a whole lot more than ride Epona.
Yeah.
Yeah.
anyone? Let's just speak about Wolf Link for just a little bit here, real quick. So, anyone like Wolf Link or like?
I do.
You
I like Wolf Link. Yeah,
I
and
was
I
fine.
get.
Quick survey here, real quick. Who likes Wolf Link? Who doesn't? Cap, you like
I
him?
do. I do.
Adam, you like
I'm
him?
kind of mixed mostly.
Like,
Yeah.
what's the thing that you would say is like could have been better? Would you say would your feelings for like what would you say? Because like I can tell you what I think I like about Wolf Link, and I think I could tell you what I don't like about Wolf Link.
I think combat could have been better with Wolf Link. I think that's the worst
what I was
part of
thinking.
it. It just is not as fluid enough and just kind of seems kind of rigid. I feel like they could have done a better job with that.
Stiff and janky, kind of.
Definitely. The Z targeting doesn't seem to do anything because even with the hold attack and you're facing the other direction, you don't change direction when you're Z targeting. You still bite in the wrong direction, which is really annoying. And then sometimes your circle, your spin attack, does, even if it's targeting something, still doesn't hit it. And then you get hit anyways. And I just don't know why they designed the combat that way. Like movement with Wolf Link was fine. I didn't have any issues like moving around or running or going around through the environments or anything like that. It was just always the forced combat felt bad compared to like just being Link in general.
I'll say this: I really do like the like charge attack, basically that one shots those. I don't know what those creatures are called.
Shadow beasts.
So shadow beasts, basically, like where you charge them. And granted, like you have to kill. You know, like the strategy is essentially is like you want to make sure you kill. You don't want to have one remaining because they'll keep arising the who's ever dead. But I do like the fact that you can basically, if you get them all three in a range, you can take them all out at once with a charge attack. I don't think I like the jumping so much with Minda, the Z targeting jumping and everything like that. I failed a few times. Not saying it's hard, but it's definitely one of those things where it's like you can mostly just mash B and get to the area, but then there's the areas sometimes where it stops you and you have to then redo it. That's probably my little gripes with Wolf Link.
Oh, speaking of the dashing to Midna, there were times in the storyline it's just like, why can't I just dash to Midna right now?
Yeah.
Like there were certain moments that I had to go all the way around just to get up to this top thing, but I'm like, why can't I just switch to Wolf Link and just have Midna jump to Midna right here?
Right.
Yeah, and whenever it was in there, there's rarely any optional rewards that you could get by going on a different path. So why wouldn't that just whole thing be a cutscene? I just don't understand why it was in the game 90% of the time.
Right. And then with some of those jumps, like it'd be multiple jumps in a row, but it would like break it up. Like you would do like a 3-step jump and you have to go somewhere else and then do a 5-step jump and then do a 1-step jump. It's like, just make it one, get there and be done with it.
Yeah. When you're in the Zora's domain, especially, that was something that I remember. Like you had to stop, you had to wait for an icicle to crash, then you could go again. And I'm just like, there's no big like containers. There's no heart pieces for me to go grab right now. Why am I even doing this? I should just be like, all right, we're here. Let's go to the top. And then it just shows me jumping and fades in, fades out.
And I know we've talked about this, and I don't mean to rewind for a minute here, but like I want to discredit because I just thought about this here when I'm talking about Wolf Link. I want to say I really love the character designs of like the Shadow Beasts. I think those are some like creepy looking bosses, especially like for a Zelda game. Like because like the goblins or bogoblins or whatever, like they always kind of like are somewhat similar, but like these are like creepy creatures and like they scream and everything to bring each other back to life. Where I love the character designs for those villains. I kind of wish there was more of that. Or more designed characters kind of similar to that. But like Xant's character design, until probably you see what his face really looks like, like Xant being presented as like the main boss or main villain until he's not, right? You can almost expect it out of every single Zelda game that Ganon's always behind it, unless you're playing Skyward. But I love Xant's character design, and even his little overall story arc, I think is pretty good. But then like you fight him and he's kind of just like the little hoppy, weird battle fight around him. Like, I don't know if they came up with just like, we had this great idea. And we just couldn't figure out like the cherry. We couldn't find the cherry for on top here for him. But other than that, I still like Xant's character.
Yeah. Go ahead, Adam.
I was going to say, which is similar to A Link to the Past, as I was saying earlier, is because you had behind in A Link to the Past, you had Agnem, or if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, I'm not sure.
Mhm.
But Link or Ganon was behind that as him being that boss, and then Zant was kind of that same kind of role almost.
Just the puppet. Just the
Yeah.
puppet for
Just a
Ganon.
puppet.
Yeah, when it comes to character design, I love how the enemies look and stuff. I feel like they're great in cutscenes. You mentioned the cutscene before with the King Bulbin, like going slow motion, rounding the corner and stuff. They look badass. They look intimidating. And then you fight them, and they're just kind of goofy. You know,
Yeah.
Bulbin and Zant are both kind of just idiots that act all goofy. You mentioned Zant hopping around and stuff. I was like, I had such high hopes for that boss fight because he was kind of creepy, had a cool character design, especially when his mouth shows up and you can see kind of his face. Like, it's kind of creepy looking. And then you fight him, you're like, this is it.
You know, that kind of brings up like an interesting point, because I remember hearing about this, like looking up for like little interesting details about this game for this month to talk about. That originally they were gonna make just Wind Waker 2. They like that was the plan. They're like, hey, we're making Wind Waker 2, and then Nintendo of America went straight to Nintendo of Japan and like, hey, you got to make a serious Zelda game here. You have to make it like, you know, dark. People are still mad about that GameCube teaser thing. So they went back and like they said, hey, like we think, because I think Nintendo of Japan wanted it to sell. I think Wind Waker might have it's sold well, but I think it might have undersold what they were thinking, at least for selling in America. And they're like, hey, you gotta, if you want to sell in America, these are the things you gotta make. You gotta make these changes to make it a little bit more darker. This is what would appeal to Americans here to sell the game, and they did. And I think it for the longest time was the best selling Zelda game up until maybe Breath of the Wild. But like maybe when it comes like with the overall designs, I also heard like Lord of the Rings was a huge influence for designing this game too. Maybe with that is like they had this great idea on like an image to go with, but they couldn't take the kiddie elements out of it, you know? They're like, oh, it still is like a Zelda game, it's for kids, so we have to make it a little bit goofy, you know, a little bit here and there.
Mhm.
So
Which I actually we were talking about the bokoblins in this game. I actually like them way better looking in this game than I do Breath of the Wild. I don't like the way they look in Breath of the Wild whatsoever. They
I'd
look
agree.
so weird. But as far as like this game itself, though, as I was playing through it, and especially as a Dark Souls fan, especially Dark Souls 1, it feels like there's so much influence of Twilight Princess in Dark Souls. Because you think of the boss Sif, big, huge wolf with a sword. Like, there's just so many things throughout that game that made me think of Dark Souls 1. Did I feel that this game has probably inspired so many games beyond it? And I think Dark Souls 1 has to be inspired by Twilight Princess to some extent. Maybe not completely, but to some extent.
no, you're right about it being an influence. I think I've heard years ago like hearing Demon Souls was like a big inspiration on like the Zelda. Zelda was a big inspiration on Demon Souls, but they just were going for more of also the NES difficulty here kind of thing where you're gonna learn on your own. But I've said it before when I was a guest on for the Nier episode that I felt like the first Nier game was highly influenced by the Zelda game, like a darker. It felt like a very dark Zelda game, and I put it down below here as like possible recommendations. As like I still have yet to play it. I've only started it, but like Okami always comes to mind, and it came out right around the same exact time, right where you're a wolf, and it seems like it's very much like a Zelda game too. Still has never been chosen yet for the Cartridge Club, so maybe we can correct that here one of these days.
You know, throw that in there because Okami's game I have on the PlayStation 3. I have it on the PlayStation 4, but I have still yet to ever get around to starting that game. It's been in my backlog. So you let me know when that's available, and I will do my.
I would love to get back to that. A couple years ago, I started playing it and got actually really far in it, and then for some reason, I got busy for a couple weeks and I couldn't play it, and I just never went back to it.
Oh, I also think that game has like a 2-hour tutorial too, as well, or something like that.
Yeah, yep.
Or at least the opening cutscene's like 2 hours long before you actually play the game. So very similarities to Twilight Princess here. So I digress, though. Let's get on to the music here. Did you guys like have any favorite tracks or least favorite tracks? I'll start off real quick here.
Sure.
A lot of this music is like from Ocarina of Time. A lot of it, it's so. I mean, it hits to me like I guess it's one of those cases where it's like. Maybe this is part of the gripes where people said like we're griping about this back in 2006 when it came out that it was too similar to Ocarina of Time. Maybe this was the case, but like a lot of the tunes are from Ocarina of Time. The one that I I think stands out that's different is probably the intro theme. Adam, when we saw the Zelda orchestra, I think
Yes,
that's
we
all they
did. That
played
was
from
great.
Twilight Princess was the intro, because everything else is in either Wind Waker or Ocarina of Time, or it's a classic Zelda tune, right? So,
Which, I mean, comes back even before Ocarina is, the main theme song when you're running around in A Link to the Past. That theme song was also in Twilight Princess. It was a little bit remixed, but it was still really good. But again, yeah, this is just like a collection of the Zelda music from before. So it's like, for me, as I played through it, I mean, just the classic tunes just kept staying in my head. But I mean, it didn't feel like it was specific for Twilight Princess.
So yeah, I really liked it. And like you mentioned, I think when you already like something from another game that you like Ocarina of Time, more of it is not a bad thing. Especially since this one just seems a little bit more orchestral than obviously Ocarina of Time. So it just takes that great music and makes it better, in my opinion. So I really like it. There weren't any weak songs to me, in my opinion. I was re-listening to the music this morning to kind of remind myself, because I beat the game in the first couple days of April just because I love it. And so I flew through it. And so I couldn't remember specifically, but I really liked Lake Hylia. It was just very calming and relaxing. And so that's why I was a big fan of that song.
For me, I love the soundtrack to this game, but like in my mind, I remembered it being a lot more orchestral than it actually is in the game. Probably from the Zelda Orchestra, probably from the 25th anniversary CD that came with Skyward Sword. And so when I get to it and I'm like, oh, that sounds more MIDI than orchestral, especially like even Wind Waker, which was more orchestral. I was kind of thrown off by that, but it wasn't really a big issue. It's just something that I noticed while playing, like, oh, I thought this sounded a little more, had more oomph to it. No, it doesn't. But
no, you just brought up a great point there, and the orchestral point, and with Wind Waker, Wind Waker's a little bit like Ocarina, where you have to play the music. And just like Ocarina of Time, like you have to play the music to warp. You have to play the music, and it'll take you to the specific temple where you're constantly playing it. So it's gonna keep getting burned in your head. Like, okay, like this is this song. And because this game really doesn't do that to me, I would say like nothing is like bad, but like nothing's like burned in my head from this game where I'm like, that's that great. Aside from the opening theme, it's great. It's just one of those things where it's like, okay, that's unique, and that's the only real original tune I can think of from this game.
Yeah, Midna's Lament, I think it was called. Yeah, like that tune will stick with me. That's always going to be part of this game. Everything else seems like it's a remix. Atomic brought up earlier, Super Castlevania 4. They did the same thing in the last couple levels where they remixed, NES tracks in that game. It kind of feels like the same thing here, where it's like, hey, we got slightly better music technology. We don't have a full DVD that we can put it on because we're using this little tiny mini DVD. So we're gonna have to, not use a full orchestra because we can't fit it. But we'll get close, and that's kind of like what it feels like in this game.
Does there anyone have any side quests that you remember from this game? Because there's always parts where you have to hit, and then there's some skippable stuff in this game that it has. Like if you're having a good time, you want the heart pieces, make yourself stronger. Is there any side quests that people remember from this game?
Yeah, so I felt like a lot of the side quests were good, but not in their entirety. For example, like the pose. When you do the first 20 pose, you get a bottle filled with Great Fairy Tears, which is great. That's helpful. But then if you do all 60, all you do is get the ability to talk to Giovanni's cat, and you get 200 rupees every time you talk to him. Which honestly, in this game, rupees are plentiful. You really don't need to. I mean, there's plenty of times I'm in a dungeon and I find a chest and I open it and I have to keep the rupee in there because I have a full wallet. So that's not very great. And then, what was it? The bugs, I like doing the bugs, and it's nice that you get the giant wallet from there. But again, at that point in the game, I feel like I don't really need the giant wallet anymore. I don't really need the rupees for much because I don't really buy a lot of stuff. So while it's good for certain things, it's just not fully fleshed out, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I agree.
The bugs was kind of pointless to me. Like, I didn't feel like I needed rupees for anything after I got the Hylian shield. I was like, all right, well, I'll get it. I'll always have enough to replenish whatever I need. And then I had enough to replenish whatever I needed. It didn't really seem like a big attraction for me. And then on the Wii U one, you had the side quest of getting the Miiverse stamps, which do nothing now because Miiverse doesn't exist. but they show up on your mini map, and you're like, oh, I wonder if that's something else I need to get, and it's a stamp, and you're like, oh, I'm just wasting my time. But yeah, that's about it.
You know, one thing I dread, and it's not too bad, but I hate having to kill all the electric bugs. It's not like it's like a Slayer quest before you can really start the mission, but I hate having to like sniff them out. The Wii U version, the HD version, made it less. I think you got like less bugs. You had to fill up the.
I think it's like 11. Yeah, well, it's a lot better than on the Wii version. I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, yeah,
God,
the
that's
original
so
versions, there's 15 that you have to kill, and they brought it down to 12 in the HD version.
So a little speed up mechanics. It's just as the equivalent of the Super Sail or wherever from Wind Waker, right? Where you don't have to change the direction; you can just sail wherever you need to go. It's just like the same equivalent.
Pretty much.
Is there any other gameplay mechanics that you guys can think of, or complaints that before we move on?
Well, I give them credit for listening to the fans to change that stuff for the HD, because I mean they could have just made it HD and still made us do all that, and it's nice that they listened to cut it down and make things better for us.
Unlike the Mario 3D collection, which was just a lazy port. Anyways,
Yeah, I was gonna say the reeds, like blowing into the reeds to get the hawk, especially once you're going up Death Mountain and you have to do it like 7 or 8 times, and there's a 20-second cutscene of the hawk coming down every single time, and it's just wasteful. I just didn't like it at all. Wasn't a huge fan of like the wolf howling either. Like it just felt kind of janky. It would have been better if it was button assignment like an Ocarina was. But that's just a personal thing for me. I just didn't really like that much. I already talked about Epona and how it was sticky, and how some of the movement and the Z targeting didn't work all that well. But yeah, that's all I got on that.
I think the combat itself was pretty good though. Like I thought it was pretty like just the swords fighting and blocking and fighting. But I also felt that again, like I don't know if it's because I'm a better gamer or now than I was then, but it feels like the game was just super easy. Like I didn't really die all that much throughout my whole playthrough. And sometimes it was just dumb stuff of the reason why I died, but where I was just tired. But it was just super easy.
Adam, how far did you get with like for completionist as wise? Like did you get all the hearts, all the bottles?
I didn't get all the bottles or all the hearts. I played through the story because I was working both jobs this month. I kind of just stuck to the story and just got through with it and then finished it off. Especially since I was also streaming it, so I just stuck to that. I didn't go to the 100% getting all the stamps, all the hearts, all the weird side quests. I did the 20 pose for that, but that's all I did for that one.
Oh, I asked that because like Ocarina has four fairies, and this one I believe you have 6 bottles for like. And if you have 6 fairies, basically, like if you have like 6 bottles going against Ganon, like you're safe. You're pretty much like, I know Adam said it's gonna be a cakewalk, but it's pretty much a cakewalk fighting Ganon with at least having that much fairies. Like I wouldn't worry about struggling too much in that final boss fight against Ganon.
I think I had 1 bottle for the final boss fight, and I think I used it. I don't even remember if I used it or not, but it wasn't that hard. And then when you get to the final phase of Ganon, like I literally walked circles around him, and he couldn't hit me, and I just beat him. Like he wasn't even that difficult.
Yeah, I think I had 1 fairy when I first got it, and I never used it the entire game. So Adam mentions the ease of the game. Honestly, in my opinion, the Zelda series in general is pretty easy. Other than Zelda 2, which is probably easily the hardest game in the series, they're all relatively easy games. I think it focuses more on story and gameplay than actually being a difficult game. So, but then you brought up the Ganon fight. That brings me back to the gameplay because I love the hidden skills you can get. Specifically, my favorite is the backslice. So with that one, you target on him and you spin behind him and you hit him in the back. That works great for so many enemies, especially the last fight in Ganon. So that's basically what I do. I Z target him, I spin around him, I keep attacking him, and then he eventually is dead. So I love all the hidden skills. I use them pretty much all, but backslice I use the most.
I didn't even use that skill. I literally just walked behind him, like just tiptoed around him. I didn't even use that skill. I just literally just circled him like Yes, that's all I did. Just the analog stick, walked around him, and just hit him.
But the backslice is so much fun. Like
true.
to see him spin.
True.
I love it.
Very true.
Anyone like the boss fight against Zelda then too? The little twist where you the tennis racket match against her, right?
Yeah, the typical Zelda fight or typical boss fight in these games, right? It shows up in like every game.
Well,
that's like the tennis
we
fight
don't have a
Ocarina.
Gerudo. Yeah. We don't have Twin Rova in this game, so I guess we have to add something.
Yeah. I don't mind it. It's still like whatever. Let it go fast. See if you can just keep mashing it while doing it. I don't know. It's fun.
It was fun. I liked it. It's kind of like the one that you got in Ocarina, where you're just tennis back and forth, and same even when you fought Agnum in A Link to the Past. You could use. I actually replayed A Link to the Past last year, and that game is actually a little bit harder than what I remember. So that is one of the more challenging Zelda games. But I remember the very first time you could use the bug net to hit it back, and I did that for the very first time. I used to always just use the sword, but I don't know if you can use like any sort of net or anything.
Yeah, I don't know about Twilight Princess. I mean, I know in N6 in Ocarina of Time, right? You can use a bottle.
Yep.
Right.
The fishing rod, I think.
Fishing rod, yeah.
Okay.
Or I can't remember. Wait, maybe the fishing rods that just distract them. I can't remember. It's like, what is this? You might be able to smack it back. It's been a minute. Just gonna give a quick shout out to the streamers who played this month with Oaz, Q Dogs, and Adam. Thank you for streaming this month. We love having the publicity of playing the game of the month. Advertise the game. We greatly appreciate that. Also with the community, like with our Discord here, I want to point out Retro Brew's comments real quick, saying like he's kind of torn on the graphics of the remaster for Twilight Princess, where he thinks it didn't turn out as good as Wind Waker. Shout out to the community here. And good old Top Spot here. He's a little sorry about not being able to play this month, because this is like his favorite Zelda game of all time. And he also kind of mentions the part where we talk about how it's got a slow slog of a start, but that's his only criticism of the game. Stumptown, I'm going to start with you for Zelda recommendations. All right.
Yeah, no,
all right.
I was going to go with Darksiders 2, for sure. It's definitely a recommendation for anybody who likes Zelda and likes something darker, something maybe a little bit more intense and more hard. That's definitely taking this Twilight Princess sort of formula and taking it to a much more mature level. And I feel like anybody who's been looking for that would find it in Darksiders 2. It's a criminally underrated game that unfortunately still doesn't sell well. And because of that, you can probably pick it up for like $2 to $4 most of the time. So yeah, give Darksiders 2 a shot. 3's mediocre. Get 2.
What about Darksiders 1?
Forget that exists.
Okay.
It's a good game, but 2 is by far superior.
And do you have any other Zelda recommendations? Maybe like they would be close to Twilight Princess, or
maybe not necessarily close to Twilight Princess, but close to just Zelda in general. And I honestly will say this is arguably probably the best Zelda clone ever made. But this game might be hard to find now, and it might be more expensive now. It's called Alundra on the PlayStation 1.
Cool. And Cap, do you have any other Zelda recommendations, or?
Yeah, I'll stick to like just Zelda games. We've mentioned the similarities to Ocarina of Time. So if you have not played Ocarina of Time yet, you got to play that. Very similar to Twilight Princess. And then the light and dark world elements. Obviously, Link to the Past has that. A Link Between Worlds is an amazing game on the 3DS. I actually prefer it over A Link to the Past, but both are fantastic games.
I agree. It's better. I will also say like the Zelda games. Since you said that, I'll say Majora, because Majora also has a little bit of influence in this game, and it follows the timeline. And you get a little Skull Kid reference here in this game as well too. But Okami always seems to be similar to me with the stick out with the wolf. I know I mentioned that earlier. Also, I know I've said it before too, and I said it on the Nier show. I'll say the first Nier game. I think that one is very much a dark Zelda game too. The only thing about it is it's very unique and different in itself. So I would expect it, to be saving the princess, but it's very much the 3D action, go on an adventure kind of game, just with its own little unique twists to it.
I'm going to ask which version of Nier? Are you talking about the remake?
The remake is, well, to me, like I played it originally on the PS3, and I felt that originally playing on the PS3. The combat is better on the remake. So
story's different. The characters, the relationship between the two is different. it's father-daughter in the original, like American Western version, to where the remake goes back to the original to where your siblings.
Yes. But it's and they added an extra ending to the game too. But still, I would say those are the ones that always stand out to mind. I always forget about Darksiders, especially Darksiders 2. But with that being said, that's the show, everybody. But I'd like to thank our panel for being here and helping us with the show. Cap, why don't you tell us where we can find you online?
Yeah, first I just want to say thanks for having me again. It's always fun being on the show. But you can find me on Twitter and on YouTube under Captain Algebra. I stream semi-regularly on Tuesday and Friday nights. Fridays, I'm kind of focusing on my Genesis collection and going through that. And then Tuesdays, I sometimes take requests. Sometimes I play what I want to play. And then I occasionally make videos. Mostly I'm focused right now on completing my Genesis collection. I have a long way to go, about 400 still. But I am chronicling that as I go, updating every month on the games I get.
Thanks for being here. Stump, where can we find you online?
You can find me on Twitter. I pretty much retired from doing YouTube like 8 years ago at this point. But that's just because, life and things got in the way, and I became addicted to Destiny for 6 years. But, things like that happen. But yeah, no, just find me on Twitter. I'm also on Discord as well. But yeah, just hit me up on there. This is still my same name on YouTube. You can find me there if you want to. There's nothing to watch, but you can find me there.
Thanks for being here. And Adam, where can we find you online?
You can find me on Twitch. You can find me on Discord. You can find me on Twitter. I am on all platforms. I stream usually 4 days a week. And yeah, my schedule is starting to get more. It's better just to go to my page to see what my schedule is, because I'm trying to figure out the best time frame for my viewers to have it set up. But
Adam, I called you by your name, but why don't you give us what your handle is? Because sorry, I know you probably want to promote your handle here because
sure.
So.
It's the Atomic Bomb 1980. 1980 is the year I was born. I go with Atomic Bomb because I played rugby and football growing up. So from that point on, like, I've always been called A Bomb or Atomic Bomb. So I'm just like, you know what, that became my PSN name, and I just carried it on and threw it into Twitch.
Yeah, I've known Adam for quite a while here, so I'm used to calling him Adam, not by his handle. I'm used to calling him by his first name here. But for myself, you can find me on Twitter and the Discord and Instagram with the handle ItsRocketSauce. I'd like to reiterate, May's game of the month will be Sewer Shark. If you're playing along or just wanting to discuss the game with us, make sure to let us know by using the hashtag Cartridge Club on whatever social media platform you frequent. For those of you who want to get a head start on June's game of the month, we'll be playing Fallout 3. If you're interested in being a guest on the show, please reach out to us. We're always looking forward to having new community members on to talk about the games they love. To those of you interested in supporting the club beyond a review on the podcast app of your choice, I'd like to mention that the club is entirely funded by pledges made from members of our community. We are extremely grateful to those supporters, and if you're interested in becoming one of them, please look at how you can do so at patreon.com/Cartridge Club. But that's the show, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. See you night.